I think Avery's like trying to.
There we go.
There we go.
Sorry.
All right.
You know what? We'll
Cool,
take you
man.
inside. We've got some golden hour light now. Perfect.
We got it.
Perfect.
Got it. Cool. Do we want to get started?
Yes.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's get started.
All right, Danny, kick us off.
I didn't.
Wait.
I guess I'm the moderator. Thank you, everyone who's joined. This is our first group IG Live. This is my first time doing a live. Actually, this is my first time doing IG Live, period. But this is the beginning of our series. I guess this will be a series called Growing in Public, because we as a team, as the Guild, we are growing. We have grown, and we have a lot has happened in the past year. And we just wanted to have a check-in with our friends, with our followers, with people who know us, and let y'all know what we've been doing, what we've been up to, how we got to this point, and what is coming up in our future.
Cool.
Yeah. So I guess we want to start with kind of introductions and who we are, because a lot of people know the Guild as Nikishka. A lot of people know that I work for the Guild because I run the building and I run the Airbnbs, and like you might not know all of us, and so let's introduce ourselves and kind of explain how we each got to the point where we are, which I think will in its own way tell the story, or kind of on-ramp us a little bit of how the Guild got to where we are.
Yeah. Thanks, Danny. Should I get started?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you should go first.
Okay. Is Avery on? Because I don't, oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, he's here.
Avery, you can hear us, right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Sorry, I have some connection.
You good? Yeah, sorry, y'all, for everyone joining. This is our first time doing it. We are public. I got another notification, Danny, live.
Say that again?
I got another notification that Kinky Thought is starting a live. Should I?
No, just ignore it.
Okay, I got it. Okay, so I guess we'll get started. So for people that don't know me that have joined our live, my name is Nikishka, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Guild. And I guess I could start with like what the Guild was meant to be and where we are today. Exciting. When I started the Guild, I don't think I could have ever conceived that it was going to be like a real estate company or a real estate cooperative. And yet here we are today. And so maybe I can share a little bit about the guy who, especially for, I think if you're listening in that followed the Guild for a while.
You're cutting in and out a lot.
Oh, am I cutting out?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Seems.
What about right now?
It's better.
Is that okay? Okay, sorry, y'all. My wife is really bad. You can hear me, okay?
It's a little.
Not yeah. Just
Ugh. Okay, what about right now?
that's a little bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh God. Okay, we're doing it. I'm just gonna get started.
Go for it.
Tell me if I'm cutting out. So when I started the Guild, we started the Guild back in 2015, and at that point, to be honest, wasn't not thought about like necessarily company or anything like that, let alone like real estate company. I was looking for a house at that point. I was trying to buy a house for myself. This was 2015. Single. I was, like just looking to buy a house for myself. But I was also looking to create a kind of community around myself. And so back then I had a full-time job. I was working as a management consultant at a top management consulting firm, and my work included doing like social impact consulting for large companies. More just strategies, serve their communities better. And I was also starting to get a little bit jaded with that job because we were working with really large companies that were doing a lot of the social impact stuff or sustainability stuff or climate action stuff with just the bare minimum. And so, I was just starting to get jaded with that and was really looking to someday maybe start my own company, but had been in this field of social entrepreneurship for a while. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just seeing Grace's comment. Can you also hear me?
Yeah, it got better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have been, was interested in this field of social entrepreneurship at this point. And I had also previously, when I went to school in Austin, in Texas, had lived in cooperative housing. After Austin, moved to the Bay Area and had been part of like seeing sort of like startup houses and things like that. And so was really interested in creating a home for like social entrepreneurs that were doing stuff for their communities, like that were trying to make a systemic change in their communities that didn't necessarily have the support systems that they needed to thrive as an entrepreneur, as a organizer, as a community leader. And so it was sort of this like large experiment of like, I need the support system to do what I'm doing. And so let me just, I'm buying a house and I'm single. So let me try to create this larger support system for other people that might be on the same path. And so that's really where the Guild started. So we had, the way it was structured back then was a 10-month program. It was for social entrepreneurs living together under the same roof. We had a program designed around supporting the growth of their ventures. We had a program that was designed to support them as leaders. So we did things like mindful meditation. We did things like personal finance coaching. We had workshops on, various startup workshops, the whole gamut to really support them as entrepreneurs holistically. And while we were doing this, the people that were in the program, like we ended up being this sort of like incubator for social entrepreneurs that was a residential incubator. And we started getting a lot of traction in local media in Atlanta, which I'm super grateful for. And it was that point where I was like, oh, this might really be a thing. Like, I didn't think this was going to be a business or anything, but maybe there's something here based on the demand that we were getting. And so for like every room that we had about 30 people, 40 people on the wait list for every room that we had. And so just sort of recognizing that this was a thing that people were interested in. But at the same time, we were having these really, based on the people that were in the house, in our first cohort, we had folks like, I don't know if people are joining in, I don't know if they know folks in Atlanta, but we had people like Bame Joyner and Portia Thomas, and we had really dope people in the first cohort that, outside of working on our individual ventures, we were all having conversations around and what was going on in it. And, just seeing the, like, at that point, housing prices just sort of escalating, Black folks being pushed out of the city of Atlanta. This was all back in 2015, 2016, and it was really bad then, and it's gotten way worse since then. But yeah, just having these real conversations about, really about gentrification and racial capitalism. And from there, me just recognizing that, like, I wasn't ever looking at us as a real estate company, but that we were sitting on real estate, and that was part of what we were doing besides the program. And recognizing that I need to get really intentional about that real estate, because the same people that were serving these communities that we were trying, just all of these Atlanta communities that have been historically like disinvested from, just recognizing that the same people that are serving these communities can't live in these communities anymore because housing prices are just getting crazy, or if they own small businesses, commercial real estate was getting crazy. And so just realizing that we're sitting on something that needs structural and systemic change. Real estate as an industry needs structural and systemic change. And so from there, it started out as one house. From there, we partnered with a real estate developer to do a mixed use project out on Auburn Avenue with this sort of focus on quote unquote revitalizing without displacing. So Auburn Avenue, for people that know Auburn Avenue, not only was it the birthplace of like the civil rights movement and all of that, like Dr. King's childhood home, 2 blocks away from us. Not only is it all of that, it was also a street where like Black wealth really thrived in that era. And since then, thanks to, white supremacy and systemic racism entrenched in all of like urban policy, that it has fallen into a period of disinvestment. And so when we were working with the developer, it was this whole goal of, investing in Avenue without displacing folks from there. And so we did a co-living program. We were the first company in Atlanta that did co-living for just co-living period. That was a new for the Atlanta market of it. And we brought together small business owners, artists, community organizers all together in that building. And it was really dope. And I'm going to hand it off to Danny and just to meet the whole team. But Danny joined us soon after you were the first person that applied to be in that space, Danny. And so Danny lived in that building and then, joined our team, and she can tell you her whole story. But while we were doing that, I'll just add that, we worked with the developer and realized that even this developer that was really, from a mission standpoint, was really intentional about revitalizing without displacement. At the end of the day, if the capital that's going into real estate projects and the terms at which the capital goes into real estate projects and the ownership of these real estate projects doesn't change, fundamentally nothing about the industry was going to change. Rent prices are still going to go up. People that have historically been in that neighborhood, Black folks, working class folks in that neighborhood, poor folks in that neighborhood, were still going to continue to get displaced because that was just the quote unquote market. And so we got really intentional about just creating a new market for real estate. And that's really what I guess we're here to talk about today, our new initiative, Ground Cover, that's about creating just an alternative to extractive real estate development that continues to economically and geographically marginalize Black folks and other folks of color across the country. And so I guess we'll share more about the project, but I'm going to let Danny introduce herself and then the whole team introduce themselves.
Thank you, Nikishka. I am Danny Brockington. I don't think we're giving our titles yet. We're not doing that yet.
No, we are.
Okay. I am our community engagement and programs manager. And as Nikishka mentioned, I met Nikishka and was introduced to the Guild because I was living there. I ended up moving in 2018. Yes, it was spring 2018. And I had actually, at that point, I'd been living in Atlanta for about 5 years. And I'd been living in West End. And I had this adorable little house that I loved to death. I would have porch parties all the time, and I was always doing always doing something. I'm an artist, and I'm a production designer and art director for short films. Shout out to House of June. I I'm a writer. I do all this different stuff, and it was like this creative space for me to do all those things that I was like kind of in my groove of doing. And a tree fell on my house during Irma. I think it was Hurricane Irma, and kind of like threw my whole life off, messed up all my stuff, went straight through my bedroom. All my clothes were gone, all my fashions, all my art supplies. It didn't get my dinnerware, so I still have my brunch materials. But I was like stuck because in that 2 years that I had lived in that particular house, prices for housing had skyrocketed so much. And I was looking in West End, I was looking in Westview, I was looking in Mosley Park, and I remember even at the time when I was this is just like a personal thing. I remember at the time when I was looking at rentals, I looked at so many I looked in Capitol View, I was looking everywhere, and I remember looking at so many houses where the owners of the houses hadn't even bothered to clean them before having people look at them. Like there was active waste and stuff in these houses. It was and the rents were so high. And it was, and the advice I was given was it's a seller's market, and people, the same house that you walk into that is full of garbage bags that's been sitting here for 2 weeks that they didn't even bother to clean out before having an open house. As I'm leaving that open house, there's people who are like, yo, how much is it? Yo, we want it. And I know that the rent they're asking is already like way high and pushing the prices up in the neighborhood. I didn't realize that the house that I was living in was really elevated for what the area should have been, because I didn't understand all of these different bits and pieces when I first moved. I was thinking, oh, I lived in an apartment and I'm moving into a house, so it should cost this much. And not understanding the concept of pushing the market out, not realizing that my landlord at the time was someone who would put her tenants out, because in Georgia you can just end somebody's lease for whatever reason, and so she would like it get to the end of your lease, she might end it early. She ended mine like 2 months early and just raise the rent and then have someone else come in. Like I was still kind of in the beginning of understanding that cycle, and at the same time I was trying to learn more about that cycle, but the message that was coming to me was, well, if the prices are going up in the neighborhood, then Black people just need to make more money. If you want to save your grandma's house, then you need to make enough money to pay your grandma's property taxes. Like there was no discussion about like, what is it that's happening and how can this be counteracted? Like you can't just say it's the market, because that was the refrain, it's the market, and you can't do anything about the market. And it just was a very hopeless feeling. And so after I left Atlanta and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go home to Charlotte, be at my mom's, get my mind back together, work for a while and save up, and then try to go back to Atlanta maybe in another year, maybe in 6 months. And about 6 months later is when I found out I just saw a post in a group I'm in about the Guild. And I was like, this is interesting. And these are micro apartments, they're studios, but I can live in a studio because I don't have furniture anymore. And I looked at the building, I met Nikishka, and just the concept of living in this shared space, being in this shared communal space, and having this community around me was just really attractive. The reason that after I first moved to Atlanta and I lived in Midtown in an apartment for a year, and I remember like reading the neighborhood issue of Creative Loafing and saying to myself, I want to live in a neighborhood. I want to live in a community around other people with other Black people. And I want that life again. I want that life I had when I was a little kid living at my grandparents, to some extent. I've always chased that as an adult. Um, and so yeah, it was just really it was really attractive. I really loved the concept. I went and visited the building and it was the cutest place. And I moved in and it was like a soft place to land. And it was a safe place to land. Um and just the idea of it, just the way the we had Airbnbs in the building, and like the way it was supposed to work financially was like the Airbnbs in the building subsidized the rent for two of the units that were kept at below market rate. And it was super affordable. Everything was just one bill. Like it was exactly what I needed. And over in the process of being there and in the process of eventually becoming the community manager of the building and just learning all these different bits and pieces, it all started to like click and come together. Because I remember even before I moved to Atlanta, while I was living in Atlanta, I would see these buildings and think, like, what could you do with that building? What would I do with that building if I had the money to just buy a building and make it into whatever I wanted? And I remember there was at one point across the street from my house, basically in West End, there was a 6-up apartment building that was for sale for like $100 and something thousand. It was some crazy low number for that much, for that kind of space. And I was like, oh, some Spelman students could live in it, and a mom with kids. And I just had this dream of this like communal apartment building garden situation. But I was like, I have no idea how to do that. Like, I have no idea how to execute that. I could actually get a mortgage and do this, but I have no idea how to actually do it. So it was something that I let go. And so it's just funny that along the way I've ended up in this role with the guild, in this position of being in the position to do that and help communities and help other people and learn at the same time how you build communities like that, both from an interpersonal level and from a financial and structural level, and how that can be done at scale and how that can be replicated in a way that allows communities to reroot themselves and kind of interrupts or disrupts this incredibly huge disruption of gentrification. Because that idea that you can't stop the market is the market. That's just the way it is. That's the way it's supposed to be. I've never accepted that. I've never been okay with that. And it's been dope to meet other people who feel the same way and who can, like, together we can figure out how to make that reality.
Avery, do you want to go next? Because I feel like you came on. Yeah, you came on after.
Yeah, I feel like that makes sense.
First of all, like even Danny coming on. So we haven't talked about this on IG or anything yet, but like we as a company are converting into a cooperative, and everyone on here is like becoming owners of the business. And it has been really dope. Like Danny, like I think starting out as like a resident and then community manager, and now like, yeah, like future like worker owner, just that whole flow and evolution has been, and like us becoming friends, like has been great. And I feel like everything with the guild has been that way. It's been like I put out a bat signal and I find people that are values aligned and mission aligned and have the heart and mind and all of it for this work. And so, and like Avery, yeah, Avery, tell us about your story, because yeah, that was like a fellow like comrade and tribe member that just came along. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll just drop in where I think Danny left off, or I'll do similar to when Danny, where I came into the guild or how I was introduced, and then I'll just give y'all some background. So my name is Avery Ebron, and I'm the head of community products and ops at the guild. Um, I think I was introduced to the guild virtually like years ago before I actually like got involved with it. But to make a long story short, before I got involved with the guild, I was in the working in the community development for a community development financial institution. And so essentially what they do is they fund projects in communities, if y'all don't know, that banks or other, the market typically deems is too risky. And so coming out of college, I got involved in that sort of industry because I felt like that was where it's at to really like get resources to people that need them and that don't normally get them. So that's why I ended up there. Um, but just to give some context, I got introduced through was applying for some funds that were for like entrepreneurs of color doing great things, and I kind of from afar got infected with some of what the guild was doing, and immediately I think I said to myself, "Wow!" Like, and I didn't mention this, but I'm from Augusta, Georgia. I had lived in Atlanta, and then I moved, bounced around. But I thought to myself, when I come back to Atlanta, I want to live at the Guild. So a couple years, like 2 years before I actually spoke to Nikishka directly, I had told myself that. But I kind of continued on in the community development industry and focused on a lot of like writing grants, helping projects get money in neighborhoods that need it, like underserved projects, underserved borrowers, trying to figure out how to get more money, more funding where it isn't. Um, but one thing I kept seeing, and one thing that was sort of frustrating, was that it didn't seem that everything that happened seemed to to happen because of the people sort of who was already in power wanted it to happen, but the people on the ground really didn't have a strong say in what was happening in their communities, even with. Can you hear me?
I think it just cut out just a second ago.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, from that standpoint, I had started working on like sort of a venture to help support community development happen from the bottom up. So like just focusing on instead of money coming from the government down through organizations, through other organizations who decide what happens in your community. Essentially, you and the people and the stakeholders in the community get to dictate and kind of like make happen what you need. And so, just really focusing on that. And the more I dived into that, and the more I kept like reading up on the guild, the more I was like, you know what, this is real interesting. So I was in California. I made I decided to move to Atlanta because I wanted to be closer to like projects and movements and organizations that I felt aligned with. And I remembered the guild and I moved in. Well, I tried to move in. I I some I applied to be in the property. It's a long to make a long story short. I think I got helped out a little bit, but I ended up in the property. And then I ended up talking to Nikishka and Danny and just listening to a little bit more about what they were working on in terms of focusing on like helping communities in real estate from the bottom up be co-owned and co-designed and thinking through all of that stuff. And so that's when I decided to just like, take the leap and just hop onto the guild. And so that's how I ended up here. And yeah, really right now, I'm excited because although we're still early, it seems to have just from the way things look, we seem to really have pushed out the idea of like collective ownership in Atlanta, of that this is like a real thing that's tangible and not just like some fringe idea, but people can come together and steward their own properties and determine and co-determine what's taking place locally, and not just be subject to the same old cycles or just subject to the same old organizations that, you know, they're supposed to help you out, but they can only do but so much. But there's things that can be done from the bottom up and collectively coming together, making that happen, changing the conversation around what real estate really can look like and how it gets designed, how it gets developed. So that's really what brought me here, and it's been amazing to see us like actually taking strides, actually like so much energy, so much love, so many people supporting, just in a short period of time what's happening. So just super excited, and I think, and I try to tee up Entourage. Right before Entourage came, we knew what we wanted to do. We were trying to like figure out like how to like get a property, how to co-develop it with the community, like how to make that actually happen, how to collectively own it. And then we were like, okay, but none of us can design a building, or like none of like there was this like huge like we want to do this and we know people that can help us do it, but we was like, man, we could really use some support and like imagining like the real bricks and sticks, is Joel, he's not on the call, says, but like the real, like how to make this like thing that we've been believing in and faithing in, and people have been faithing in and believing in with us, like how to bring that into reality and still let it be like practical and real and beautiful. So with that said, I'm gonna pass the buck to the amazing Entourage and let him tell his story.
Thanks, Avery. You're too kind. Um, Hi, everybody. My name is Antariksh. I'm the Director of Development and Design at the Guild. Can you all hear me okay? Cool. Um, yeah, no, thanks, Avery, for that, because I think it is it's a good entry point to how I came to this work. So I've been an architect for about 8 years. I born in India, moved to Canada when I was 17, went to school up in Canada, worked a bunch of places while I was in school, moved to New York. Oh, I'm sorry. Um, I was an architect for 8 years. I graduated from a school in Canada, just outside of Toronto, moved to New York.
It's
Is
still
it still?
it's still a little muffled.
Huh. um, I'm gonna change nothing and ask you if that's better. Is that better?
Not at all.
All right. How about
I think it might
how
be.
about this? Just okay, hang on. Let me take my headphones off and hopefully that'll be any better. Also, my iPad's about to die, so that's happening.
Oh, that's great.
Is that any better at all?
So much.
Yeah, it is actually. Yeah, it's a lot better.
But can you all also hear yourself now? Because there might be an echo.
No, there isn't.
Okay. So, yeah, as I was saying, I graduated from university in Canada, moved to New York, worked a few places there, and then moved to Oakland with my wife, who's also an architect. And this whole time, I was getting really disillusioned with architecture because it seemed like the best thing that you could do was build places for rich people to park their money. And it was just like a sliding scale of luxury to absurd. And like on the sort of, let's say, the 99% of spectrum where like most buildings that we inhabit are built, on that end, architects almost played zero role, because really what you did was put some sort of cosmetic face onto what the developer wanted to build. And oftentimes when a project comes to an architect's desk, it's already like the developer already has in mind exactly what it's going to be. What you do is like make it cool so the developer can market it, and then you just like do some glitzy renderings that all look the same. We're all living this generic utopia imagined by developers. and there was just no room to really get into figuring out how people live or testing anything that was like not just conditioned on private ownership and sort of my space, your space, very clear delineations, no room for any of that. So it felt really stunting, and it felt like all architects were really doing was making sort of piggybacks for rich people to put their money in. And at that time, I was looking for someone who suggested that I consider going back to school for development so I could engage with questions of ownership, learn to speak the language, understand really how you could start to address these things. So I went back to school for development, which, I mean, in a lot of ways, developer is still a four-letter word for me. And I think it's just a tension that we are all holding doing this work that we talk about often about how like thinking about this sort of stuff changes us. But going to development school allowed me to start engaging ownership and shared equity, especially, and the idea that, for example, if a building appreciates in value, that it's not just for one person to capitalize on that appreciation, that that building is appreciating because of all the people in that neighborhood who are making it what it is. And it's not fair for that not to be distributed equally. And so the idea of shared equity became really interesting to me as a way to get into doing architecture that was truly social and democratic, and like we could base an architecture on social relations as opposed to like financial concepts. And around that time, I was recently moved to Atlanta. I was in 2019 with my wife and was pursuing a job with the Atlanta Land Trust because that was the only shared equity sort of concept I knew in Atlanta. And they were having some struggles during the pandemic, but in the meantime, they connected me to the Guild, to Nikishka and Danny and Avery. And I remember like the first conversations we had, I was blown away by how receptive you all were to everything that I wanted to explore and everything that I thought that needed exploring. And I remember getting off that call and being really excited about it, but not knowing how to communicate that to Lena, my wife, because it just felt so like surreal. And then we started talking more, and you all said that you all were thinking about like buying this building, and I was like, this is ridiculous. This is too good to be true that this is happening. Here are some folks who want to like do development and architecture in a way that is owned by the community, is permanently affordable, and there's just like, it really gave me hope again that going back to school was worth it, that I didn't have to work for a private developer, and that I didn't need therapy anymore. And it was really, really, it was like a hallelujah moment. And I'm so glad to be connected to you all. And like doing this work off, like Avery said, a project that is intentional in a way that it strives to not just default to what the market does, to Daniel's point, and is deliberate about its impact. And we have so many conversations about all the externalities of this project, and some we can control, some we can't, and like thinking through it all. So yeah, that's my story.
Yeah. We should probably tell them what ground cover is and what the project is. Who wants to do that? I think what Grace just said in the comment about, she said shared equity is the opposite side of the continuum of ATL's idea of getting equity that's like flipping housing. So yeah, someone take the bait and tell people what ground cover is. We should have probably practiced this before, but like I don't know.
Nikishka, you want to take a stab at it?
Well, okay, I can. Danny, do you want to?
I default these things to you. I'm gonna default it to you.
All right, fine.
We know you love your ecological metaphors, and
oh yeah,
you know that ground cover comes from that, so we don't want to steal your thunder.
Okay, cool. So the name ground cover, that's what Avery is alluding to. So actually even the name, the guild, like, I mean, people know what a guild is, but where we got the name from permaculture, where like a guild in permaculture is different plants and organisms like mutually benefiting each other in a particular area to enhance like production of crops, right? For lack, yeah, just to simplify it. And so we looked at the guild as, yeah, a way to bring very different people together to mutually support each other, the interest of like everybody thriving. And in keeping with that plant-based analogy, ground cover are like new initiative and forthcoming fund. Ground cover in an ecological sense is, if folks are stuff like that, everyone's doing like pandemic times, but ground cover is basically like a layer of vegetation that binds topsoil and prevents erosion of topsoil, right? And like topsoil is like the, I don't know, yeah, everyone knows what topsoil is. I don't need to get deep in all of that, but let me stay focused. But yeah, and so the analogy is that communities of color act as ground cover in our like national and global economy, where like communities of color bring like cultural vibrancy, they bring communities of color are organizing for like democracy, are organizing for racial and social justice, and it's the same communities of color that add so much vibrancy and richness and like center our economies that are also at the risk of being displaced because of racial capitalism. And when we talk about displacement, we're talking about both like economical displacement, as well as geographical displacement, like physically getting displaced from their homes and being pushed to like the outskirts, quote unquote, but also like economically being marginalized. And so when we talk about ground cover as a project, as a fund, as an initiative, it's about repairing this layer, bringing repair and healing to communities of color, starting with ownership, starting with collective governance, starting with cooperative economics, in pursuit of self-determination for communities of color. And so that's sort of like where our name came from. And over the years in doing the guild, I don't, like I said before, like I did not, somebody introduced me the other day, I've said this before, but like somebody introduced me the other day on the Zoom call as like a real estate developer. And that was weird. Like it was so weird to hear that. And I was like, oh, real estate developer? Like that's not who I am. But later I was thinking about it and I was like, yeah, like what we're doing is real estate development, and maybe I need to lean into that definition a little bit more and reclaim what this is about. Because if we think about where real estate in this country, really real estate globally, but real estate in this country has been about, has been like the seeds of colonization. Like the real estate industry is what sowed the seeds of colonization, like taking and stealing land from native folks, and then using stolen labor to build on this land, has been the genesis of the real estate industry. Now, when the real estate industry talks about equity and anti-gentrification and inclusion and all these other things, like I think we're being disingenuous if we're not sort of getting at the root of what the issue is. And so when we take a step back, like, you know, from a personal standpoint and a collective standpoint, like we're very much sort of anti-capitalist that you're hearing from right now, but also very much like existing within this paradigm of racial capitalism and trying to build what we know can be a better future, and a future that all of us can have, all of our communities can have some self-determination for. And so the guild has, like, I've really looked at it, and I think like all of us now are starting to look at it as our like canvas for like, how do we build something that doesn't exist today, that is a paradigm shift from what is out here in terms of what the real estate industry is. And we're not talking about marginal changes. We're talking about fundamentally rethinking what we as a society value and how we build an industry around what we value. And so all that is like great to say philosophically, but like what does that mean in practice? Like in a lot of ways, like I think what we believe philosophically is our tension that we hold as a team. We can't practice a lot of, I mean, we can practice a lot of that in the personal, but as personal, sometimes it's hard to, I'm sorry, can y'all hear me?
Yeah, you're clear.
Okay, that was echoing. It's like hard to build this like future system while living in a system that like has all these different constraints on us today, and when that system being capitalism. And so fundamentally, like I think all of us on this call on this live believe that like housing is a human right and it should not be a commodity that is up to a speculative market to like decide who deserves to live in a house and who doesn't. Like that is a fundamental flaw in our society that we have all accepted as just like a given, right? And I think what we're trying to do with ground cover is question a lot of the assumptions that we have all been told is a given, and actually like pull back the layers a little bit and be like, we don't have to accept this. There is another way, there is an alternative, and the way that we get to that alternative as being our new paradigm is through some kind of collectivism, through some kind of cooperative economics. Like if we all jump up and say like, actually like screw the status quo, like we're going to try to do something different and build something that can be a viable alternative to what the status quo is, we can get there. And so this is the ground cover is just sort of our like, some people might call it naive, but it's more like hopeful and determined attempt at creating what an alternative real estate industry could look like. And that starts with collective ownership of property. While property is still something that is private and is not up to what we call the commons, where everyone can share, while we're in this current state, that we can get away from like private ownership where one landlord or one property developer or one investor or one private equity company gets to control the future of entire communities. Like that shouldn't be the case. And so what we're trying to create is like the alternative model to that. And so ground cover, and I'll let Avery maybe talk a little bit more about the model and everything, but ground cover is about democratizing ownership of hard physical real estate assets in neighborhoods so that communities of color that have, especially Black communities, indigenous communities, and other communities of color in other cities that have been locked out of opportunities to decide for themselves of what their community should look like, get to own and control these real estate assets in their own neighborhoods. And so I don't know, Avery, if you want to like share more about
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll touch on like the community stewardship trust model that we sort of built out in some context, and then I think we can pass it and talk about the actual project on 918 Deal Avenue, which is like the actual like real life thing that people can touch and smell and taste. So
I just want to give us a check that we're at 7:55.
Is it going to cut us off?
It may. It may give us like an additional 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay. All right.
I'll go quick then. Okay, so everything Nikisha was saying, so ground cover would theoretically like fund and like bring in the energy for all of these things. So sort of the model or the vehicle through which these things that we sort of worked on could happen is what we call the community stewardship trust. And just for a reference point, it's sort of an alternative to real estate investment trust, where you have a lot of people come together, put their money in, and purchase real estate. The issue that we sort of take with that, and that our model takes with that, is when you're not in a community, when you have no stake in the community, when you're completely disconnected, but you're purchasing and you're changing the physical environment and the social and the economic things that go along with that. There's this is a recipe for damage. And people talk about gentrification and all of those different things, but it really boils down to who has the power of ownership, who has the power of say so. How are things set up? Who are the winners and who are the losers? Who gets a voice? And so what the Community Stewardship Trust really does is it takes that sort of collective way of coming together to own something. But what we make sure of is that only the stakeholders in the community can actually be in the trust. That is one person, one vote. You're not, you're not giving power based on your wealth, but based on who you are and your stake in the community. That the entry point is easy, so you don't have to be having large investment dollars just to participate. And that there's trust beyond wealth building, and there are things in it beyond wealth building. So building and not making it a political body, but enabling people to come together to solve local problems, to use the property to support other things locally, to support the needs of the community and the folks around it. And so we're trying to roll all of that into, and it's a legal entity, so it gets kind of sticky, but really just bringing people together in an economic body, but also giving them political power, also giving them networking power to co-own, co-govern, co-steward property where they live, and to have say so and stake over what is affecting them. And so that's really on a higher level what the Community Stewardship Trust seeks to do. We've started to focus on making sure that the property itself, and I'll letting them segue to 918, but has affordable, permanently affordable housing and commercial in it, given that those are just two issues that communities constantly face, where there isn't enough affordability for folks to remain, and then there aren't commercial spaces and opportunity for folks to make an earning themselves, or folks to go buy groceries or go shop, to go do something locally and not have to leave their own place. And so we've centered focusing on property that allows for both of those things to be collectively governed and steward. And I think this is a good time to pass it to Danny and Antris to talk about the actual property that we've sort of built up for that.
And I'll just say one more thing before and maybe one of y'all talk through the model and like the actual property. But in addition to what you said, Avery, it's like people having a say so in what happens in their neighborhood, and also people financially benefiting. Like while we're in this existing paradigm of property ownership being a private thing and people financially benefiting, like when we think about wealth in this country, like the two ways wealth is built, right? Like the main ways in which wealth has been built in this country has been real estate and entrepreneurship. And we know that like non-white people, especially Black folks and Indigenous folks, have been like locked out of the same wealth building opportunities. And so when we think about what happens in these neighborhoods and everything Avery is saying in terms of agency, like that's what I'm hearing you say, Avery, is like people being stripped of their agency of deciding what happens in their neighborhoods. It's also like when neighborhoods, this like boom and bust cycle that we see in real estate is by design. Like this is not happenstance. Like this is all by design. Mm-hmm. So there is a period, public policy, like the public sector and the private sector have gotten together, and there's a great resource. There's a book called Race for Profit by Keeanga Yamada Taylor that details a lot of this, how the public sector and the private sector have been in bed with each other for years and decades to essentially create this extractive real estate market that only allows certain folks, mostly white folks, to benefit from the industry, financially benefit from the industry. And so when certain neighborhoods fall into what we all call periods of disinvestment, that is all by design. And then when reinvestment happens, gentrification happens, again, it's like white folks at the expense of other communities of color. And this is all, I think what we're trying to say with ground, or not say, but like hold very front and center with ground coverage, all by design. And so we can redesign this. This is all intentional, and like we alone can't redesign everything, but we are part of a growing movement around the country that is holding collective ownership and creating actual viable challenge that people can look at and be like, you know what? Yeah, why have we been doing this way this whole time? Like, here's an alternative that we can actually put our money into. And so the stewardship trust that Avery was talking about is not just about voting and decision-making power, which it absolutely is a big part of it. It's also that when development does happen, that those same folks can financially benefit from it. And so maybe Antrix and Danny can talk about how like people can buy shares of our property and make dividends every year and build wealth through appreciation. I don't know if one of y'all wants to.
Well, I can talk. I think this is normally Antrix's spiel with the drawings and the renderings, but
Yeah.
You got it, Danny. Go for it.
But the property that we've acquired is at 918 Dill Avenue in the Capitol View neighborhood. It's at the corner of Dill and Sylvan. And in addition to that property, there's also a small lot that's cat-a-corner to it, kind of across the street, if you're familiar with Capitol View. And this building was built in the 1930s. It's been mostly abandoned for several years now, where there's like one suite maybe in use, and then maybe another, and maybe another. But it's had a long history of like false starts and attempts at purchasing. It's actually a property that a few years ago the Capitol View Neighborhood Association attempted to purchase, kind of in the same way. And so it's been kind of this serendipitous journey that this ended up being the property that worked out, because it kind of brings the neighborhood full circle. So there are, I can never remember how many retail suites there are, but is it 6?
7.
I got it right. No, it's 7. Dang it.
No, it's 6.
I'll get it one day. Oh, it's 6. I got it right. And so through some like processing and fact finding that we did prior, we knew that there has been a need, a desire for fresh food, groceries in the area. And as someone who lived like less than a mile away across Lee, and there's not a lot of grocery. I think the closest fresh grocery is Big Bear. And so one of the suites that we know we definitely are going to have is a small grocery downstairs on the first level, with some restaurant suites kind of built into that grocery, some small scale restaurants. And then we are doing 2 levels of housing above that, which will total 18 units of efficiencies, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. We are still in the process of designing that space and figuring out what does this lot across the street, this like beautiful green space, look like. That's part of the process that we're in this co-design process with the neighborhood right now. But so after construction is done, which our construction timeline is a year and change. I've just been saying a year and change. We don't know how much the change is yet, but once we are fully constructed, the community, we've set it at the 30310 zip code. So that's from Mosley Park over to Capitol View. I can't remember how far down 30310 goes, but families and individuals from that area will be able to make an investment of I don't know if are we giving the number yet?
We're saying the initial number, not the upper limit, but the initial.
Okay. So starting at $10 a month to purchase shares in this property. And so the property will buy the equity in the building back from us. But it will immediately be under the governance of a community stewardship trust and a community stewardship. My Benadryl is kicking in, and I feel like I'm ready.
Just for context, y'all, the reason why it's $10 is because oftentimes minimum is too high, and we're still trying to figure out what that maximum is, because we don't want to let any one person invest too much and take up too much of the pie and too much of the the wealth building. But we're still working with that tension. Just providing context on that. That's what we're still working with. It's a co-design, work with community process on that. But yes, we're very intentionally trying to make it as inclusive as possible, but also make it beneficial for everybody involved.
And
thank you for that.
Yeah, and this is probably to say that we have a few more sessions planned where we're going to go into like each aspect of this project. There's like a whole financing and how we put together what is called the capital project. There's a whole other session on that. There's a session on community organizing for this, all of that. But like really there's like, and maybe I'll actually talk a little bit about these different aspects about the project, the different tensions that we are holding in this project. And what we as a Guild are trying to do, and we as the collective, like our team is trying to do, is like really pull back the layers of everything, whether it's policy, legal stuff like with zoning and ordinances, or capital, whether that's debt or equity, all of those pieces. We're like pulling back the layers on it, saying like, okay, where in all of the status quo of each of these aspects has white supremacy been centered, or like the benefit for white folks been centered over color, and how can we think about what is a total alternative look like? And so it's really been exciting and super challenging, to be honest, of like pulling back all these layers and questioning every single thing and trying to design an alternative to everything. And maybe I'll actually can like talk about some of that, because it's been really hard.
And Anthony, before you go into that, I think you're gonna answer this question a little bit too. Grace asked, do we have a model for others to pool and buy and develop property as co-op groups? And it cut off the end of the question, but are you planning to, I think that certify was the last word there. I can't read the full question, but I think you're gonna get into this in your answer.
Yeah,
definitely. Go ahead.
Oh, my bad. I was gonna say ground cover answers some of that too. That's what it's for, to support folks. But I'm sorry, go ahead, Andres.
No, you're fine. So a lot has already been said. And so broadly speaking, this is the pilot project. And the idea, certified kind of like green building certifications encourage a critical mass. I'm sorry, I'm not sure I follow. Does that mean?
Yeah, so basically, are we going to try to certify community ownership oriented projects similar to like LEED certified, things of that nature? And
I like the way you think.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, my brain is not working. So the idea is that we can grow this as a model so that other folks can do it too. And I mean, specifically to this question, we are trying to work towards our own obsolescence. Like we are going to try and coalesce all this knowledge that we can, right? That the tensions that Nikishka mentioned, everything from financing to design, construction, permitting, all of it. And from pre-development, through construction, through the life of the project. One of the things about projects like this is that a typical developer, if they're doing, say, multifamily housing or any sort of apartment building, they will have a timeline. Like they'll build it once it's stabilized, which is basically just means it's all rented and operating like it's supposed to. Within 5 to 10 years after that, they have a plan to sell it. And that's the model. And so part of the status quo development model is a sort of a carelessness, or not carelessness, let's say there's no intentionality to steward something long term. And when that's the case, you just stop caring about quite a few things because you're going to sell the building in 10 years. And so part of this work is also the idea that it's going to be stewarded in perpetuity. And so the timeline is very broad, starting from when we start and going forward into the future. And so we're trying to coalesce all this knowledge so that we can then communicate it through either these sort of Insta Live or any other sort of organized platform, and give people an ability to do this in other neighborhoods, so that, speaking a little bit to what everyone else has said, we're trying to get to a place where people can have local control of their own neighborhood. They've invested in their own neighborhood. It's also in a way like giving a gift to your neighbor. You're investing in your own neighborhood, and that's the gift to your neighbor. Or at least that's the way I've been conceptualizing it. And there's something about care there that extends care from one household to the next and sort of creates shared enterprise. And yeah, so to get back to your question, is it Grace? I'm sorry if I didn't get the name right. But yeah, the idea is that once we can develop this model, I think we've already trying to copyright stewardship trust. Is that right, Nikishka, as a concept?
Well, that's a good question. So we've talked about that's a whole. You're about to take me to tangent.
Yeah, that's a whole nother.
Okay, so wait, don't answer it then.
Why?
Because let me answer it.
Like, I'll say one quick thing about that is like we've talked about trademarking, and I think we collectively voted on like trademarking a community stewardship trust as this concept, only because there's other things that are cropping up in the market that are like resembling what we're doing, but might just be focused on maybe just the financial aspect of it and not governance. So like not giving people control and decision making what happens with properties. And I'll say like a tangent is, like I said before, we're like pulling on the status quo within the capitalistic paradigm and seeing where we can pull a lever, push a lever, change things. Copyrights and trademark has felt very icky, and I think like our whole team has it. But we're also, while we exist in the system, there's a lot of co-opting of stuff that happens as well. And so a lot of times, dominant like power, the real estate industry, let's just take it as an example, look at the concept and be like, oh yeah, that's gaining traction. Let's try to co-opt that model. The same thing with a totally different set of intentionality. So like their intentionality could still be very for only profit over people, and they could take a model like this and take it somewhere else. So we've struggled internally, and this is a whole tangent. We could do a whole other live copyrights and trademarks for this like post-capitalist stuff that we're trying to create and what the use is. But like I think it's important for us to be mindful of both that like we want information as much as possible, have as many people like get knowledge and resources to do this on their own, and be mindful that the industry that sees a model like this as a threat is also going to try to co-opt it and take over this, use it for their own benefit. So how do we maintain the integrity of what we're doing? Because what we're doing isn't just about sharing profits with everybody. Like we want to share profits broadly with moving away from investors and developers and sharing profits with everyday people. But we're also more about decision-making power. So anyway, I'm gonna ramble. So,
and if I could just jump in real quick, what I would say is that ground cover, and to add what Nikishka was saying, was founded in acknowledgement that there are already a lot of people organizing, trying to do this now, but the financial resources, the technical assistance, just the phone calls for like little things with policy or anything, variances, just support, credibility, the little small things that stop these projects from happening. Ground Cover was founded to support and empower those projects to come to fruition. And so, yeah, this is our pilot project. We're trying to get it off the ground. We're trying to make real what we've been talking about. But in the background, we're also trying to acquire the resources to make this possible, not just for us, but for other developers with this same level of intentionality. And so, to answer partially, the answer to that question is that's why we're trying to build a fund. That's why we're trying to garner these resources and put them where they're best needed and most needed. In addition to that, and we didn't mention this, but we're doing a lot of on the ground partnership work, building bonds with community. And so I think by the time things progress, some of those on the ground partnerships may be places where some of your questions could be answered because more people will be empowered the knowledge and the ability. Even if it doesn't roll into a ground cover, it'll just be more widespread, just through community, just through the people actually on the ground with the same level of values and intention. So I just wanted to say that we're also we didn't mention that, but that's like almost half of our work is just building bonds and partnerships locally. So there's no gatekeeping like you're saying in the chat, but there's just a natural facilitation of what we're finding and what we're learning with the people that have already been in the community doing this work, so that they can apply it where they see best. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah.
No, you're totally fine. I was just going to speak a little more to Grace's comment about participation and greater individual and ownership, and that's absolutely the point. Is like a typical sort of developer will own something outright. That's called fee simple ownership, and it basically gives them the right to use and abuse, which is legal language, in whatever way they see fit that property, and is essentially the seed of like other folks not having agency around what's happening in their own neighborhood. And with collective ownership, you're already like from the get-go beyond that, because there's more than one voice at any given time, because it's 10, 15, 20, hopefully 500 people in a neighborhood owning that project together, making decisions about that project. And I think also through that, speaking to Avery's point, also through that collective ownership, sort of issues of gatekeeping already start to get addressed sort of inherently in a model like that, when you have so many voices all theoretically deciding collectively what to do with the project. Like the collective stewardship starts to speak to, or starts to address that sort of issue of gatekeeping already. Like it moves beyond that in that way. And then one other thing I was going to mention about the tensions before I veered off into I opened the can of worms about the copyrights, was that there's so much to say here, so we can go on talking about this in future episodes, but like so many tensions that are built into collective ownership. You know, like for example, the goals of providing deep affordability in perpetuity and also community ownership. We didn't think initially when we started the work that those two would be in tension, but they do fight each other a little bit. And the idea there is we don't want to like have one set of folks try and subsidize another set of folks unfairly. And so like if the project is roughly speaking broken up into debt and equity, the rents go towards paying back our debt lenders, and the neighborhood investors are buying back the equity. Depending on how big those pieces are, either the rents need to be higher or the community folks need to buy more equity. And so like all these tensions are built into the project, and they play out in so many different ways, like on the pro forma and on the financing for sure, but also like just what decisions are being made, who are they being made by, on whose behalf are they being made. We have to be conscious every time that we are speaking with folks in the community to keep in mind that we may or may not be speaking to any residents of the project at that time. We may only be speaking to future owners of the project. And then we have to, and Danny does a fantastic job of this, of remembering this, because I forget it all the time, and she'll bring up the concerns that a future resident might have, whether it be about parking or open space or whatever else. And so it's like keeping all those pieces in tension because they need to be, but like, and I guess that's really what it means to live collectively, is just some level of simmering tension, but also sort of affection and relations.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll say, like, to add to that, and Danny, I want to hear from you. Like, the last thing I'll say is just to add on, there's a tension between community wealth building and affordability. Like Andrej said, like, pro forma is just basically a financial model to make it work. It's like what financial projection. And so any real estate property money is the rents that it gets to the tenant. And part of our thesis is that we want to build community wealth. So we want to build wealth for people and just the developers, just us. We want all of the owners of this property, but we also want to preserve housing as an affordable thing that people can access long term, and that we want to preserve commercial, like the important commercial corridor that have been abandoned for a while. Revitalize that accessible and affordable space for emerging Black-owned businesses. And so there's both the affordability and the commercial side that we want to preserve, like Andrej said. So that's obviously like mathematically indirect, conflict with building. So these are decisions that we're making collectively and with our like ecosystem and residents of the neighborhood of like what I mean, maybe we're okay as stewardship trust, and maybe everybody in 304 that's investing in this together and says we're okay taking less of a dividend every year. We don't need to make a return, a super high return here. Okay, taking that means that somebody that is from a working background could get to live for a long period of time, for as long as they want to. Like, these are the types of tensions that we're walking through with the project. Meanwhile, like, the rest of Atlanta is like spiraling out of control with with like prices of housing, both rental and ownership. And so anyway, I don't know, Danny, if we want to talk through about are we like where
Yeah, I'm scared that it's just gonna cut off in the middle, but to that point, and to something that Grace put in the chat, our trust of each other does not extend to money. Our classist trauma-based prejudices go really deep, and that is like, that's the crux of it, right? We're trying to battle this chimera of white supremacist capitalism that is a system that constantly corrects for itself. And it's a system that we're so embedded in, and it reaches so far that you can cut off one arm, but there's an other arm over here that you don't even realize is in operation. And so it's constantly redoubling itself, constantly fixing itself. And so another part of the tensions that we're trying to deal with is dealing with that, like how do we hit all of these angles when there's four of us? Like, this is one project. We can't hit all of these angles at the same time. And the only way to do that is to empower communities, is to take the classism out of it, like take the hierarchy out of it. You have one share, you have one vote. Like, that's one of the intentional things that is built into the governance, the way that that stewardship trust has to be governed. You don't get to put in more money and have more say, because that in and of itself is antithetical to how this has to operate. And another thing that we have to think about, or that we are thinking about, and that we have to kind of plan for, is to that point of community owned and in perpetuity. What does that mean when the community that this is for, that the people of color, the Black families that this is for, who have been historically disadvantaged, are being pushed out of the very area that we're operating in? Like, how do we make sure that this doesn't shift into, oh, we're like the same people gentrifying are now collectively owning the area they've gentrified. So that's all part of the kind of intentionality that we have to build in on the back end, that's not the back end, that's the front end, that we have to front load into the project. And to that point we do want developers to, small community-based developers like us, people like us, we want people like us to have these toolboxes and have these skills to do that. But that's part of the intentionality of making sure individual people, individual communities, because none of this is really new. What we're doing isn't, it's not novel. Not really. It's novel in the context that we're in. But we as Black and brown people, we have always operated collectively. We have always, before Airbnb, it was rooming houses. Before, what's it called? Accessory dwellings. There was a garage, there was an extra room in the house. We have always pooled our money together to help businesses, to help individuals in need. We've always had mutual aid. What we're doing really is reclaiming the practices that capitalism has snatched away from us, and that to a large extent, and I can't even put it in that we've abandoned to a large extent because of capitalism and because of classism and because of the mistrust that foments, as we are all scrambling and attempting and clawing and scratching and stepping on each other to try to get a piece of this pie that we have been taught is the only way to succeed. It's not what we're building isn't something new. It's a return to what we know deep down, and what we know logically is what has actually sustained us even to this point. I would not have had the college experience I did if I did not have the members of a social organization, of a sorority that my mom is in, that came together and pooled money together to give me money to help me go to school. We've always done that. And so, yeah, I think that when I think about it that way, and when I'm thinking about the communities that we're working with, it seems so huge. Like, it seems like it's such a huge undertaking that we have to like break apart all of these things, and we have to think about all these tensions, and we have to think. But when you think of it as like, what is it that we're reclaiming that we have lost and given away and had taken? It becomes mentally and emotionally easier to manage, and you're doing it from a different place, from a more open place, because that's what we're trying to unlock the shit we lost, basically, is how I'm growing to think of it, and how through the process of talking to the organizations that we've partnered with, talking to members of the neighborhood who have no problems getting down to the why are the bathrooms so far away from the front doors when we showed them the the drawings. And it's just and that process of co-creation and letting people talk for themselves. Like, I don't know what you want in a living space. I don't know how you want to live. I don't know how you want this neighborhood to be. You live here. You tell me. And let's figure out together. Okay, we'll be in paper in the back end. Anthony's last night was in a community meeting in AutoCAD on screen share, moving things around in the building in real time. Like, someone asked, what if the elevator was in a different place? That's not it. That's not a question I would have thought to ask that man. I know he has been drawing so many different sketches and schemes. And I was, okay, let's move the elevator. And he was like, all right, let me move this around. It's just been it's really beautiful process of doing that co-creation and doing that imagining and that dreaming. And I feel like this is a good time to plug the event that we're having on the 18th. Because one thing that we've realized, especially in this COVID situation where everything is digital and everything is virtual and we can't like get on the ground and knock on doors. We haven't been able to get on the ground and knock on doors and talk to people and just be in the same room with people and vibe off each other. We are, because things are getting safer and open and outdoorsy. June is National Housing Month, and June 19th is Juneteenth, which is a celebration of the liberation of Black people and the ending of slavery in this country. And to tie into that, because what we're talking about is a different kind of liberation for people. It's like, we never got the 40 acres and we never got the mules, but here is this, what is it, a quarter acre? Like, here's something, here's an eighth of an acre. Let's start here. So on the 18th, on the day before the official Juneteenth holiday, we are hosting an event at 918 Dill, actually across the street at the lot. We have to come up with a name with the community for that lot, and we're calling it Dillteenth. And it is it's going to be from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. And it's kind of a introduction of ourselves to Capitol View and to the neighborhood, because a lot of people don't know us. You know, we've been in the CVNA meetings, the neighborhood association meetings, we've been in the MPU meetings, but there's a lot of people in the community who don't go to either for various reasons. Child, when I was living in West End, I had to cut myself down to every other meeting because it was running my blood pressure up. Then I had to stop going all together. I understand. So we have to reach all of the people who aren't in those meetings, who have just as much say in the neighborhood and how it runs and how they want it to look and how they want to live, as the people who are in the meetings. And so we're having this event. It's going to be really fun. There'll be food trucks. We're in the planning stages, which is also being co-designed and co-planned with the neighborhood. We're having food giveaways, we're having plant giveaways, we're having clothing giveaways. We're saying shares instead of swaps, because a swap means you have to bring something and trade it. But these are shares. You can share something, you can bring something, or somebody can be sharing with you. You can just get something. And it's to really celebrate the space, celebrate the neighborhood, celebrate this community that is already so, we've never put a little foam core model of this building out. A lot of these people have no idea who we are. and we talk about it, and they're like, oh my God, we love this. So it's celebrating the support that we've already gotten, and courting and recognizing that spark that I said before of this is a thing that resonates with people because we know it makes sense, because we know that this collective movement forward, we know ancestrally that that's where we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to be doing. And courting out that spark, nursing out that spark, teasing it out, and making it flourish, giving it space to flourish and grow, and giving people space to imagine what this looks like. And I've loved that term, building the plane while it's flying. That's what we're doing. Because time isn't stopping. The other developers in Atlanta aren't stopping. The city of Atlanta is not stopping in its processes. But we are, and I think doing it in the timeliness that we're doing it and giving ourselves the spaciousness to do this, it's like the Guild was, like 340 was for me. It's a safe place to land. It's a safe place. I feel like Ground Cover is a safe place for people to be able to say, I like this idea. I love this idea. This resonates with me. How can I learn more, and how can I do more, and how can we do more together? So yeah, it's really exciting. And I don't know how I got on that note rather than talking about the 18th, but yes, so stay tuned to our socials and all of that, and we'll be giving out more information on Dilteenth and that celebration of freedom and of liberation and the freedom to imagine as we over the next couple of weeks.
I feel like that was like a really beautiful place to end. Is how can ground cover be a soft place to land? I love what you said.
Yo, I just came up with that. It was a Benadryl, yo. It was a Benadryl.
Yeah, because I feel like that's what we've really been, working on. So yeah, we're gonna thank you for that. Yeah, how can ground cover be a soft place to land for communities that have been stolen from and harmed repeatedly? And we're building that. And I think we have a lot more coming up. I don't know if I don't even know. So I mean, we have a lot of stuff coming up, but we've got a few lives coming up on various topics of the project. So I guess like stay tuned to how we're creating this soft place to land. There's the finance aspect of it, there's a policy aspect of it, there's a legal aspect of it, there's a people aspect of it, there's like an internal unlearning that we have been taught aspect. There's a lot of stuff in this that we have been sort of pulling and unraveling the threads on, and we are really excited to share all of this with y'all. So yeah, y'all can do this in your own homes and cities and countries. So how do we want to end this? Y'all do it.
I think we're good. I think I don't have, I can, wait, let me break out my, I don't have music. I feel like we need soft music to play us out. Some smooth jazz.
Soft.
I think your voice was jazz, Danny. Yeah.
Your voice, Danny.
It really is.
Yeah, it was playing the notes for us, stringing our souls. I think it's beautiful.
I thought of it that way. Soft place to land. Like, I don't know. You're just like, yeah.
Does that work?
Thanks for, yes, this works. This works. Thank y'all so much for joining us, for hanging out with us, for chatting with us. Hey! Hey, would love to see. Yes, please. There will be more conversations. There will absolutely be deeper dives into all these different aspects. So if you are, I know so many people who are like, "Yo, let's buy a building," and then like, we don't know, how to. You don't know how to. The SEC got rules. Like we don't how to even. You gotta do it in a way like we're deep dives into all of that too, because all of this is open source. This is open source information that everybody should have, because the only, like I said in the post I made on Facebook earlier today, the only way we're gonna get over, under, through, out of all of this is together. We're all we got. And so let's do that.
That sounds
So
good.
are we saying good night?
We are.
I think so.
All right. Good night, y'all.
Good night,
Good
y'all.
night, everybody. Thank you for
Be
listening.
blessed.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all for tuning
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
in.